Discover your inner goddess and live up to your highest value and most abundant potential. Welcome to Grateful Goddesses, a podcast that empowers you to unleash your inner goddess and take the leap of faith to live your best life. Your guide, Karen Pulver, joins her fellow goddesses in soulful conversations about gratitude, personal growth, authentic living, and a bevy of topics affecting women today. Let's start the show with your host, Karen Pulver.
I'm so glad that you're all on this journey. I would like to introduce Shilpa Alva. Come join us, Shilpa. Hi, Shilpa. Shilpa, how long have you and I known each other?
I think it's been over 10 years, right?
Yes. So I met Shilpa when my husband and I were out with some friends and we went to dinner and they said, "Oh, we just have this charity function to go to." Well, we're just heading there. And my husband and I said, "Oh, we'll come." So we went. It was like the end of it, but we went and I was amazed. First of all, it was this incredible, it was at a beautiful space. And not only that, it was kind of cool because Jonathan Taze was there from the Blackhawks and he was supporting. And since then, we came home to tell our kids about it. And there was a product that they were showing about filtration that we showed our daughter. And from there, we just took off being involved with Surge. But I'd like to tell you about Shilpa. She is a woman who I feel that is in true alignment with her purpose. She is living a purposeful, driven life. She's found her calling. She is the founder and executive director of Surge for Water, which is a Chicago-based nonprofit organization that has provided safe water and sanitation solutions to 1 million people in 11 countries. The spark that led Shilpa to the founding of Surge started when she was just 7 years old, while she was visiting extended family in India. However, after graduating from Johns Hopkins University with a degree in chemical engineering, she joined the corporate world. From here, she enjoyed rapid early career success, earned her MBA, and continued up the corporate ladder. Eventually, though, Shilpa came to the hard realization that she was not living in true alignment with her purpose. This led to Surge's eventual founding and to her leaving a successful career and secure lifestyle. This leap of faith has led to great things for her, both through the joy she experiences in her daily purpose-driven life and through the communities who benefit from Surge's work every single day. And I have witness to that. I have seen that. In addition to her passion for safe water and global development, Shilpa loves to travel to new countries, read, practice yoga, meditate, and my favorite, dance off beat. You dance on beat. I've seen you dance.
Completely off beat.
So Shilpa, when I was reading your bio, there was something that struck me. When you came to the hard realization that you were not living in true alignment. Please tell us more about that story, that moment. Tell us more.
Yeah, so I think it actually wasn't a single moment. I think it was a culmination of like ignoring this calling for the longest time. So when I look at my journey of actually first hearing this calling and understanding that I wanted to fight injustices, I first heard that, it's like 7 years old. Like that's when I understood that was inequality in the world. And, I didn't start Surge until like my late 20s. So it was a long period, like 21 years in between. And I know I was a kid and a teenager in that process, but, it was always there. This whole like this calling, this voice that was telling me that I had to do something more, which a lot of you have already shared, right? You've all had these callings to do something in service of others. And I think for me at some point, as I was like, going up the corporate ladder and kept getting promoted and winning awards and getting to do these like amazing international trips and just things that like someone in their 20s just like loves, right? This is amazing. You get to go to I think I've been to almost every like Western and Northern European country through work, and like Caribbean and South America, and so I was just in this world that was like so fun and so fast paced, and just getting recognized for it, and my ego was definitely just building. And it was so busy, it was such a busy life that I'm just even surprised now when I look back that somehow I had that moment, those moments in between to self-reflect and evaluate, like, okay, is this the life I want to live? Like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing for the world? Have I forgotten that 7-year-old child who was, who knew what right and wrong was? And I wasn't doing wrong things, but it was just like, I wasn't serving the greater world in a way I knew I could and that I had the passion for. So it wasn't a single moment, it was a journey. And I think, starting Surge was just finally like, okay, I'm going to try something. I'm going to do something that is, that responds to that initial calling.
And you had to give up a lot when you did that. And I'm curious about that, and as well as our goddesses. And in addition, if you had pushback or resistance from family or friends when you did that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a long journey, even between. So I started Surge in 2008, and I actually only left my corporate job in 2014. So when we first met, Karen, I still was working full time in management consulting and like living this fast paced life, like traveling to like Fortune 100 companies and like still progressing on the corporate ladder. So what was happening was I was working full time in a really demanding job, and then nights and weekends I was running this organization. And at some point, probably 2 years, I mean, this was a journey, right? Like 2 years before I actually left, it was 2012, and I went to Haiti for the first time. And that was actually the first country we started working in. But when we first started Surge, we would just partner with larger orgs and we would send them the money. And like that was like my version of service. But we're no longer like that. We have a very different model right now. But when I first went to Haiti in 2012, there was no turning back after that, because when I saw what I could do if I put my skills into something like this full time, there was no not seeing that anymore. Like once you actually firsthand see the struggles and like just spending the time to learn and understand from communities. And there was no way I was going to be able to do that with 3 weeks of vacation in the corporate world, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's just not possible. So at that point on that trip, I realized I had to quit, but I had no money. Like I was like, my 20s, you just spend everything you have. I was making a lot of money. So this is crazy that I had no money. Like I don't have kids. My parents paid for I was completely privileged from like not having debt, but I would still spend all the money I had, right? So then I'm like, all right.
Yeah, you talked about having nice shoes and handbags. And
yeah, I was all in the designer clothes line. I just did what everybody around me did. When you make a lot of money that young and you don't have obligations, you spend it. You spend it at bars, at restaurants, on trips, on clothes, on jewelry. So I did all of that. But then when I realized at the point I knew I was going to leave, then it was just a journey towards that. And so what I think I realized was that I knew my family would freak out because, I'm Indian and you are meant to be, like if you're in the business world, you're meant to be a CEO. If you're not a doctor or a lawyer, an engineer, right? You've chosen the business path, so you go up there as far as you can, or partner if I was EY. And of course, at the consulting firm too, everyone was like, oh, you can be on the partner track. Like, this is great. So I started to basically share this idea that I'm not staying, like I'm leaving. So my family and friends were the first to know. And they went from initial shock to being like, wait, she's serious. She's actually going to quit at some point. And some of my friends who had like heard about it for the longest time were like, you just quit already. You've been talking about this for so long. But it was challenging, right? Like one, I'm not a US citizen. I'm an immigrant. And I also had to make sure the visa stuff worked out well, because just from being an immigrant, you're connected to your employer. You can't just leave when you feel like leaving. Mm-hmm. So I had to wait for my green card. I mean, there were just practical things that I had to be smart about in the process. Mm-hmm. So I just figured out like who was going to be my allies, like what's that tribe I needed to build among my family and friends, and made sure they were along and they understood, like my mom wanted to be comfortable that I had saved enough money when I left the corporate world and then I would be safe, right?
Right.
So I took that journey, but then as part of that, when you talk about giving up stuff, I moved out of my apartment, but everything in storage, so I gave up downtown Chicago rent, right? It was like living, I think, just in the West Loop at that time. So just those kinds of things of like, stop buying things, like unnecessary things, start living a minimalist life. You're just switching like your practices, and it's very easily you'll realize that you don't actually need a lot of money to not even just survive, to live like a a normal life. And of course I had support, right, of places to stay and things and people who were behind me in whatever I did.
That I remember watching your TED Talk, and you were talking about giving up your handbag, and but now, like you said, you can live a minimalistic life and still be able to do some things. But I know Alyssa had a question regarding something like that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Shilpa, I can so relate to your story up until that moment that you left and started this phenomenal, nonprofit surge. I was in the world of corporate law, like management consulting. We both know these are not 9-to-5 jobs. They are all consuming. You said, you mentioned only like moments when you could sort of think about this other amazing thing in your life, but there's not a lot of time, right? And you just get on this treadmill, and it's such a stereotype, but yeah, you get on this sort of like treadmill of year to year and advancement and moving up this corporate ladder. And it's true. I mean, and that's what happened to me too. And I remember really feeling like there was something more for me out there, but, and also feeling kind of disheartened. In my world, I thought, my clients were wealthy private equity funds and investment bankers. And I thought, what am I really doing here? Like I'm making rich people richer. And I wasn't really sort of giving back to my community and really feeling good about the work that I was doing. So I had the support of my husband, who said, this is not making you happy. You should leave. And the money kind of keeps you, strapped to that office chair. And I also came from a family where they don't conveniently don't remember saying, but, in my family, it was, you can do anything you want, just be a doctor or a lawyer. And I didn't want to be a doctor. So I went the law route. So I had a really tough time that first morning I woke up after I left my job after doing it for so many years, thinking about my identity. Who was I if not this person that I had literally, this job that I had done for so long, this path that I had taken for so long. And I remember feeling like, what is my identity? I was a mom, I was a wife, but on the career side, that was something I struggled with. And I wonder if that was something you thought about as well. You had this other great thing, this amazing purpose, but I wonder if, because you had done it for so long and, there were family pressures as well, that, as you mentioned, was that something that you thought about?
Yeah, I absolutely did. And I think I thought of it from a little bit even, and I'm sure this was part of your experience as well. It's like, those were all my friends as well. Like that was my friend circle, right? Like, what did I do every evening? Any evening you were at the office, like Thursday, you'd go to like a bar and have happy hour, right? Like these are my circles, and like your friends become your coworkers. And there is such a thing, right? If you live a certain lifestyle, the people you gather around you in that lifestyle also are part of the corporate world. So for me, it wasn't, the career part would definitely define me because I was doing well in there and I was gaining, I was sort of known in like my career space, like at the company and just, other people around in the industry. So I was definitely defined by that. But I think it really helped having a passion that was so strong that I was okay. But I mean, honestly, Alyssa, like till today, I feel like I don't belong when I come back to Chicago, right? That's why in the time that it wasn't COVID, I was like, I spend most of my year outside. Like I spend my time in the field countries because I feel like I belong there. I go to Bali a couple months of a year because it's super cheap to live there and it's amazing. But then I'm in the spiritual community, but I find it really hard still over here. It's changing because I'm starting to get introduced to more people who are sort of like more like-minded. But it's weird. It's weird when you're in this, because then you're that person like, oh, that's amazing, you did this, but I'm just a regular person. I'm just like everyone else. I just happen to follow my passion and not like continue to be a slave to like what I was doing. And, I have to check myself on this, but then I can't help sometimes being judgmental of like my friends, right? And like the circles of like how they spend their money and their time. And I'm like, there's so much poverty in the world. Like, like, do you really need all these things? Do you really need that? So then that's not right either. So yeah, I think I still struggle with that because it wasn't just the career, it was my whole life that was built around, that career I had, right? And like how you were traveling and what you're doing and where you can afford to go and what kinds of clothes you buy. And it wasn't me, but it was just who I was in those circumstances. And you think it's yourself, but it's not you and stripped away. Like, who are you? Who is that? What's that soul? Who's that real person? But, you know, we're human and we're so easily think that we're connected to this. And, you know, and like flip side now, like people sometimes use my name and Serge synonymously. And I'm like, no, we're separate. And of course, this is my passion. So now it's like, I'm also recognizing, and I question that and I evaluate it quite often. Like, is my identity Serge? And I don't want it to be. But very often people meet me because that's probably what I talk about the most. And I'm passionate about the work. But I have so many different facets of myself that, you know, most people don't get to see. So then that becomes your new identity. So you switch from one to the other. So it's like a constant thing. And I think with any of this, what's helped me the most, like deep meditation practices and things like that, where you're like, once you know who you are from the deepest level, like at a soul level, then that's all that matters. And it's easier said. I mean, obviously this is a continuing practice, but that I think is what's really helped me like identify, like, okay, I'm me, and Serge is something I'm happy to do that I'm passionate about. So yeah, I definitely resonate.
It's, I mean, I love your journey, and I've actually been studying with this woman, Rama, in the suburbs. And so everything that you're talking about, like your soul and meditating and like really understanding who you are and what your passion is. And I keep thinking, though, it's not so bad that you're synonymous with Serge. I mean, you're synonymous with this fabulous organization that you birthed, and you're doing so much good. Like, again, like even I think you could talk to me for 5 minutes and I'll tell you I was a PTA president. Like, I'm still so attached to that identity, and because I'm struggling with what's going to fill that part of me. And again, even like the fact that I don't work, and even as proud as I am, and I feel so thankful I could do that work, I still struggle that I don't earn an income and I'm not contributing to my family in that way. So I don't know this. Are you single? Like, did you do this completely on your own? Like, you don't have someone else supporting you except for your family and your friends and all the love and everything, but you really took this on completely on your own. And I think that is so brave. Like, that's amazing. Really amazing.
Yeah, I am single and I did take it on my own. And sometimes I'm like, you know, you listen to like top executives, men or women, and they talk about like how they had a partner in life, and like that's how like through the hard days they got through. I'm like, maybe how much further would I have been if I had that like constant partner, right? So of course I recognize that, but it hasn't been a limitation. I mean, a part of it, because of the lifestyle I currently lead, it's also hard to be in a relationship that can last, right? Because you're just always moving. But just from a fear perspective, Rachel, I want to share that when I finally left the corporate world and I was talking to like resigning to the partner at the consulting firm, he's like, how do you feel? And by the way, I tried to resign multiple times, and one of you shared this earlier too. Tried to resign multiple times, and every time I tried to resign, they're like, "Fine, just work from home." Fine, like they just kept giving me everything to keep me, right? Because they didn't want to lose me. So increasing salaries, all that stuff. But when I finally resigned, you know, knew I was resigning, there was no way I was taking any offer. He said to me, you know, he asked me how I felt, and I said I was really afraid because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Like I really felt like I was just jumping off. You know, I kind of sort of created like a landing pad because obviously I was preparing for it, but you're still jumping off that cliff and you hope that landing pad can catch you. And he said, you know, the fear in our heads is always, always less than we make it out to be. Like, you know, just remember that. He's like, I know you're really afraid, but what you're doing is not that scary. It's more scary. Like you're always like, oh, this is like the scariest thing I'm going to do. But when you actually do it, it's not. So it's like we build things up. We build fear up to be something so big. And, you know, when you actually do it, it's sometimes not that bad. And it hasn't been scary yet while I've been doing it. I mean, there are moments, of course, but it's like, it's been kind of cool to, you know, sit with that uncomfortableness, to sit with that fear sometimes, to sit with that like uncertainty. And there's benefits of that, right? Like there's excitement around that too. And there's creativity that can come out and other things that when you're in a comfortable spot, you don't create. Sometimes you don't stretch yourselves, you know, so those are the benefits of like addressing that fear.
I was intrigued by something that you said. And it takes me back to right now with the racism and white privilege. And you said while you left corporate America, you didn't want to judge your friends for continuing to overspend, let's say, or feel righteous in what you were doing. But I think that's a really important distinction in conversation, because I think sometimes pushing yourself to say something that might be uncomfortable reaps a lot of benefits. And I ask you, with your experience of not the blueprint, but how do you have that? You know, do you just be really candid to say like, hey, you know, surely you can donate somewhere that's a passion and it's a small amount, and it may not be you doing it for Surge, but come on, let's be realistic. And then again, maybe a small percentage is going to be like, screw you, I'm living the high life and that's what I'm doing and that's what's going to happen. But you know, I heard you say in a really nice way, like, I don't want to portray myself as this righteous person doing all this good and these people are irrelevant because all they're doing is spending and making more money. And I wanted you to speak to a little bit of that balance, or how you do both, or can you? And
yeah, no, that's a great question, Tina. And I think it's something that I'm trying to figure out, very honestly. I think for me, you know, you go back to the whole, like, just live the example, and like, hopefully you inspire people to the example of the life you're living. And I've definitely seen that happen, like in my closest friends and circles, like they, you know, when I talk about the work and I speak about it passionately, like, yeah, there are, like, I've definitely inspired people to give up corporate jobs and follow their passions, have people join the nonprofit world or give more than they would have before. So I definitely see that happening just by being friends with someone and continuing to be authentic to myself and living, you know, in the way like I want to live, you know. And there'll be moments, right? Like we were joking about the designer bags that I don't buy anymore, but I still carry a bag that I had from my, like, it's old and it's like, I probably shouldn't be carrying it anymore. And it's probably like falling apart and it's a designer bag. And I'm like, so like people will comment of like, hey, you need a new bag or you need a new thing. I mean, so those are the things where I'm like, well, no, I don't need it because it's functioning. And, you know, like family members will be embarrassed sometimes of like things that I'm carrying or wearing, right? Because we're part of a certain level of society, and like you dress a certain way and you do certain things, and you know, I'll get gifts from people like, oh, like here's something, and you're like, yeah, you really think I didn't, you know, like I just decided I don't want to spend my money that way. So I think those are ways that I've been trying to influence it. But you know, I guess you're right, maybe I need to address it more up front. So I haven't thought about it in that way, Gina. So I think that, like, if anything, that's food for thought of like, how can I be part of moving someone faster along in that journey? Because I think I've been doing it sort of passively, right? Like in terms of like, I'm just living the life I'm leading versus instigating that movement.
I mean, for me, it's comfortable to be passive, right? That's where
you're right. Yeah.
Pushing myself to be a little bit more forward, even if the question is maybe inappropriate, or I don't say the right language, or it does sound righteous, then I can like learn and grow. And I just, you know, I don't get to have those conversations in my life. I'm sort of looking to have them now with the world. Yeah. So your experience has been helpful.
I think with our family, when we met Shilpa and learned about this Surge mission, it started out when I came home from that event. They had a product there called Life Straws, which is actually a portable straw filtration system that you could actually go to a pond, drink from the straw, and it would filter the water. And it was just mind-blowing that there was something like that could be given to people to use in a place where they could not have access to clean water so easily. So we had one, we brought it home and we showed it to our kids. And my daughter, she wanted right away, she was like, how can we get these to people? And we discussed as a family. So she developed a project called Skylights, where she made candles, she sold, and I think she ended up with, how much did she raise?
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. It could have been a couple $1,000s towards Surge. And that was really how we started. But from there, just learning more and more, and then asking Shilpa, going to events, and then the menstruation event where my daughter got involved, and then donating we almost had a trip to Haiti, but it didn't work out. But doing those little things in addition to donating helped our family. And Shilpa, you never asked us. You never said, hey, can you come do this? It was just showing us what it was, and then we took on to do it. And for example, the menstruation sisterhood project, that if you want to talk a little bit about, you had a lot of people this time, especially because it was on Zoom, but it started small and it got bigger. And the same with Surge and your events. I remember that fundraiser. How many people were at the first one? Like
less than 100 probably.
And then how many were at the last one?
Over 500.
Can you talk a little bit more about Surge and some of the other things that you actually do?
Yeah, I would love to. So yeah, one of our tagline is really the ripple effect, right? So what you're describing now is truly the ripple effect. Like everybody has the ability to do something, and then that has cascading impact. So yeah, when we first started in Chicago, like we had to beg people to come, right? It was like you happen to know a common friend of mine, which is how you got there, Karen. But everybody else was like, please come. You know, my sister lived here at the time. I didn't even live in Chicago. So it was all her friends. And now when we look at the environment we have now, it's amazing, right? We are able to gather all these people. And I really think, you know, when anyone, I mean, it sounds like everyone here has had involvement in nonprofits. And I think the culture of Surge, the values that we hold, like we really feel like you're part of a family. So when people come into our events, it is different. It's different from large organizations for sure, because you do get that very like close-knit feeling because it is organized by just, you know, predominantly volunteers. So I think that's just one piece of like, there's something in it that's special and calls people, and you can have amazing impact in whatever way you're able to put in. And then the work that Surge does, we do all of this to provide water, sanitation, hygiene, and menstrual health to impoverished, vulnerable communities around the world. And so you're looking at anything like wells, rainwater harvest tanks, water filtration units, and then, you know, building toilets, hand washing stations. And then very recently, in the last 3 years, I think we realized that as we're working in all these communities, that the girls would be dropping out of school because they didn't have access to menstrual products, or their bathrooms are just horrible, like just no doors, almost falling apart or falling down, and then they're sharing with boys. So like when they have, like every month when they have their cycles, they don't have anywhere, they don't have the products, and then they don't have a place to go. So we're like, okay, we do the water, we do the toilets, but like, so that helps the girls. But we were like, okay, we need to go further with this. So then we started teaching the girls how to make reusable pads. So then at least they have something, because they don't have the money to go buy disposable stuff. And so that's been really, really valuable. And that's just been kind of transformational in the community. And then more than that, we take them to this beautiful event that's all about empowerment and like strength and like the fact that they're able and strong. And then we understand what the taboos are and all the restrictions, the social restrictions in their communities, and how can they break that as a sisterhood. And so we do this in like the field countries. We work in Uganda, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Philippines right now. And then 3 years ago, we decided, well, why don't we do that here in Chicago? Because we need to have these conversations here as well. Like there's taboos around menstruation here in the US. 50% of women in the US actually have been period shamed in their lives. And then there's actually even a homelessness issue here where women don't have period products. So we piloted it. I think Karen, you've been at all of them. So we piloted it 3 years ago. We had like 20 people. Last year we probably had about 50, and this year we were able to do it across different time zones with our Dubai team as well. So like over 100 people probably showed up between both of them. We had people from Uganda and France and Holland, and so that was super cool as well. Yeah, and we're just, again, same thing, empowering women to stand together as sisters to help the most vulnerable amongst us and understand that our cycles are so much more than something that's unhygienic and dirty.
So how can we as goddesses contribute, not just financially? What are some things that we could do?
I think a big part of any of this, right, even when we talk about what's happening in the country right now with like with racism and racial injustices, I always think that the very first thing is to like help raise awareness. You know, like, do people even realize? I think Leah living in Chicago, I mean, this happens to me all the time where people still today don't understand that there's this global water shortage, that 2 billion people don't have water in their homes. Over 3 billion people don't have a way to wash their hands. 4.5 billion don't have a toilet. So like this is today, like in the world, right? So people just don't even realize that this is a global issue that's just devastating. Like, how can we live? Like, how can we be, I don't know, there's such injustice in the world. Like, how can we be okay with this, right? So I think that's the big thing of like, just even being that ambassador of like, yeah, there's a big issue here. And then the whole menstrual health conversation. So me, awareness is a big thing. I invite all of you to come with us to the field. You know, when we can travel again. Now, we don't know when that will be, but come to Uganda, come to Haiti, Philippines, and whether it's you, with you, it sounds like all of you have children, get your children involved, like they can come with us. Because I think that's quite significant too. We've had a lot of like youth, like college age and like high school children come, and they've just been like impacted for life. Adults have been impacted too, because seeing the poverty. We work in this remote village in Uganda, right? It's mud huts, it's no electricity, everything's off grid, and it's mind blowing. So I just think seeing is the other way. And then, we are in the US, and if you want direct ways to help here, it's even like looking at what your local shelters need, what menstrual health products. There's no one, apparently, hygiene products, especially feminine hygiene products, are almost never thought of and never donated. So we partner with like a local organization here, because that's not our core mission is global work, but we can always facilitate those kinds of things, because people always want to give products. So hygiene products for women is a big way of helping as well. And then it sounds like it's a lot of smart women on this at this session, and we're predominantly volunteer run. So there's always a need for skills, right? Whether it's any of you, but even the broader network who's listening to this. Like, yes. Board members. We have 3 boards: an advisory board, a governing board, and an associate board. So there's like leadership. Well, there's two that we work with. I think there are quite a few that are coming up now. The one on our call was the Period Collective, but we've done work with the Period Project as well. So there are 2 great orgs, and that might be a future person you might want to talk to.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I really just wanted to, as a group, and I think you might have some great insights about this, exploring how we find our purpose. I mean, for you, it was clear at a very young age. You saw poverty, the injustice in the world, India and elsewhere, and you knew all along that this issue of having accessible, clean water was something you were very passionate about, and you were able to translate that passion into your life's work. For many of us, there are these times in our life when the passion and the purpose is less clear, and maybe it's because, and this group may be sort of a perfect example of that, where we're sort of finding ourselves at a transitional time where we're empty nesters, or our kids are just grown and sort of less dependent on us for everything. Raising your kids becomes less all-consuming, and we're looking out into the world saying, what else can we do? How can I give back? How can I find self-fulfillment, but also how can I be that citizen of the world that's going to do some good in the world as we're aging? And I'm trying to personally explore, finding new passions. And in many cases, they don't just sort of, they're not light bulbs that go off one day as you're sitting drinking your coffee. It takes time. So I just wanted to kind of put out to the group, how do we, at this point in our lives, we're all kind of similarly of a similar age, how do we find these new passions? What do we do?
So last year, I read this book that was just like revolutionary for me. It was called Women Who Run with Wolves, if any of you have read it. It's by Clarissa Estes Pinkola. And it's just phenomenal. And it's a very hard book to read because it's super big and tiny font, but it was just a phenomenal book. And it just triggered me in a way that it basically what she talks about is the fact that as women, especially, we are born to be creative. Like, we are creative souls. But what happens, exactly what you were saying, Alyssa, you get into these lives, right, that are very, like, even with me with Surge, you just get in and you're doing and you're busy. And if you have kids, and if you don't have kids, you're always mothering in some way, whether it's physical kids or not. And it's so much, right? And then we don't tune in and we don't create that space for that creativity. And if you don't, then you don't hear your soul. So it's like, how do you create these environments to listen to that soul so that you at least give an opportunity for that passion to come out? And one of the things that she talks about in that book is, what are your creative outlets? Because when you put yourself in those creative environments, that's probably the closest. Of course, you can do things like meditation and yoga, but creativity is the other way to start, like, opening it up and channeling. Like, ideas will come that you didn't even know were always there. So I always recommend people, and even looking up her quotes, and it's a really beautiful, and it makes so much sense to that's a tool to channel something that's deeper within.
And do you feel really much in the flow
Yes, there are times when I'm just like, yeah, nothing can stop me. Like I'm on fire. This is like I'm on this breakthrough of like, I'm just living the most amazing life in terms of like living on purpose. And yes, like when you have an idea and I think that the goal is unachievable and people come on and they want to help because everyone wants to be part of that energy. So most of the time, yeah, but of course I have low moments. Of course, you see like, COVID's really messed up like our communities and like,
Yeah.
funding and like, so then you're like, all right, wait, everything was going so well, like let's regroup. How do we respond in this time, right? Like that's been shocking for everyone in different ways, and it's really impacted the places we work in, including our funding as an org. So it's just yes, but I really believe that because I don't know, there's that whole thing. It's like if you're living in alignment with your purpose, the entire universe will conspire to help you. I think it was Paulo Coelho said that. So it's just like, putting that positive energy constantly out there. And then I just want to say, Alyssa, like one more thing to what you comment on. I think that a lot of people have heard their calling, but refuse to listen to it. Like that's really because it's what you said earlier too, that you're dependent on a paycheck for money you don't even need. So you're already like working in this like this wheel, and that's most of society, because you're in a house that you don't need. That's there's so many things, right? We can keep going. That's a whole conversation. So then you know what you want to do, a lot of times, not always, and then we don't listen to it.
Shilpa, I'm wondering how the pandemic is really affecting the work you do. I know that you can't travel to all of these countries, and that's a big part of the work. And I know you spend most of your life traveling, but what are the ways in which it's really affected Surge?
Yes, thank you for asking that, Alyssa. So the way the Surge's model works is that the work continues regardless of whether people from outside, including myself, travel there, because we believe as part of our model in empowering locals. So in every country we work in, we actually have a local implementing partner that we've hired. We pay all their salaries and they are running the programs regardless. So like actually this time has proven once again that like creating models like that, like truly sustainable models are critical because it's been able to withstand that part of the pandemic. The part that's been really hard, I mentioned earlier that 3 billion people lack ability to wash their hands at home. And as we all know, washing hands with soap is the most effective way to stop the spread. But how do you wash your hands with no water and no soap? So that's just like one of the first ways that our communities have been impacted. To the point, our health centers in Kabarmaida, Uganda, did not have facilities for patients to wash their hands or like visitors. None of them. There's like 12 health centers there, one in each sub-county, and they did not have that. So one of the first things that we did was make sure that we set them up in every health center. And then with SOAP, this becomes interesting, right? Our org focuses more on infrastructure and education. We don't do as many consumable solutions because we, again, really believe in sustainable things. Like how do you teach a man to fish so that they have fish for life, right? Same concept. So we don't typically just go give SOAP, go give baths. We teach people how to do it, and then it continues well beyond us. So for the same thing with SOAP, what we did is we basically ramped up our soap making classes, both in Haiti and Uganda. And so basically people can make their own products. And they're so happy about it. Like even the head of like one of the hospitals was like, I'm like, there's not enough from the national stores, like we don't have enough soap. But not only now can I make enough soap for our hospital, it's like, I'm going to teach my family and our neighbors, and like, we're all going to have soap. And then we taught the people in the markets how to do it. And they were like, oh my gosh, we can't wait to start selling this product. So that's just really beautiful. It's going to be something that lasts way beyond COVID. So we're continuing to make sure that there's water, that there's hygiene, access. We can't go door to door to people anymore. Like a lot of our interventions required our teams going into the communities and educating. And now because of COVID, in Uganda, Haiti was in a lockdown. In Uganda, you couldn't gather in groups of more than 10. So both in Haiti and Uganda, we set up radio shows. We've used this in the past, but now we've brought them back. And they're like, in Haiti, in Uganda, it's like a 2-hour radio talk show. And like, it's amazing. So every week, it's kind of like what we're doing here. Like every week they call on different speakers. And so the topic last week was water user committees. The one before that was menstrual health. So they keep going and they call in a village leader, a beneficiary, someone who's benefited from our solution. And then people call in from the villages and like ask questions. And
amazing.
Yeah. And the one in Haiti, I just found out, has a potential of 100,000 people who listen to the show. And that happens every Tuesday morning. So
Wow.
other creative ways that people, like we're basically making sure our message is still out in a new sort of like innovative way. So this is related to water, but then, if you want to know about the broader issue of COVID, it's just been devastating because of the fact that you're looking at both in all our countries, really, a large part of the workforce is in the informal labor market, which means they're working in agriculture, they're in markets, they're in transport, so they don't have salaries, right? So when you have a country that goes on lockdown, you've now cut off entire incomes. Like people who are farming have nowhere to go sell their goods. And so our villagers are telling us things like they're afraid of starvation. They're afraid of this is devastating things. We're hearing of things where women can't go to we have small health centers in our district, but they can't get on the ferry to go to the big hospital because the ferry no longer works. So women who are giving birth are dying because they can't get to a bigger hospital. So those are the kinds of there's farmers don't have seeds because they can't go to the nearest town to buy the seeds. So these are just so many more. I can keep going with that. So there's other implications of just the lockdowns and what's that has in terms of transportation and how their lives depend on having a country open. And yeah, we continue to, when we talk about our mission, yes, we provide water, sanitation, and hygiene, but we always say that we do that with the goal of addressing the cycle of poverty. So we're at least we're taking care of the hygiene piece, but we can't take care of everything else I just mentioned. But that's the reality of what's happening. And that's just from a couple of examples. So what's going to happen in this world, it's going to be, we all just need to be paying very close attention to how we can understand, become aware of the issues, and how we can help in whatever way, in any cause.
It puts so much into perspective, because
there's another positive part of it. Some of the villagers told us, for the first time, because a lot of times we'd work in a very remote area, so a lot of the husbands work in the town, which is 9 hours away, so they see their husbands 2 or 3 times a year maybe. So now they all had to come home, so
wow.
At least their families can be together, right? So they've shared some of those kinds of things. Okay. That were when they can get seeds, now they have more labor, the kids are home, so the kids can work on the farm. I don't know if that's good or bad, but they think it's a good thing right now. So there have been some things that basically, they were joking. This one woman in our community was so many kids didn't even know who their dads were, and now they know because they can be home. So there's pluses and minuses, but I'll just leave you with that. I read an article that said that 40 million people are going to step back into levels of extreme poverty by the end of this pandemic. And those were progressions we made in the last 3 years, and we're basically going to just rewind and go back to 2017 levels of extreme poverty.
Well, I just wanted to add, I just think it's amazing how even during this pandemic, you've been able to pivot and give them the skills, this, making the soap. I mean, you are culturally changing things across the board, and with your radio station, and even the creativity to think of the media that they use, and how you can affect that media. You're just such creative solutions that are really so wide reaching, and talking about, again, a community and the soap, and then the far reaching aspects of how many people are listening to that radio show. I mean, you are really changing the culture across the board. It's amazing.
Inspiring.
That's why I love her so much, and her passion and energy. And well, it's interesting because for me, I'm trying this new venture. It feels right. It feels good. I know that I like teaching, like I had said, and I know that people have said to me, oh, you're like the glue. You bring people together. And then I started thinking about all the people that I've met, and that's who I've brought on as guests right now. And I'm hoping to, attract more. And then even Shilpa, you've connected me to some more people, which I cannot wait to have on the show. And right now this feels right. And it could be something else that pops up. But again, doing what feels right. And I do have a question, though. I know you mentioned about children, whether we have them or, or not, but maybe this might be a roadblock that I'm putting forth. But for some of us, we have children, and maybe they've gone on and we're empty nesters, but we still feel like we have to help and support a little bit, and that might interfere with doing something for ourselves. So I don't know if any of you feel that way or not, but especially just the child rearing years where we kind of had to put things on hold, whether it be staying home or working to support our family. So can you do both? I know you don't have kids, but do you think you can do both?
So Marita, who was on our sisterhood event, Karen, that you attended, she's a mom of 2 young girls, a 13-year-old and recently 12-year-old. And she, I would say, is the perfect example of someone who is doing both. So she basically, just believes in this whole thing of like the most important education you can give your child is living in alignment with your passion, in alignment with your purpose. So that's like amazing for a child to see and be part of. So I don't even think it's like, can you do both? I think you almost have to do both if you want to raise the next generation of thoughtful, kind children, right? Like, do you want children to learn that this is like life, like where you're living in these, and I understand this, it's kind of a privileged conversation too, the way I'm saying it, because obviously there are bills that need to be paid and there are things. So there are situations where people cannot, because there's just no way, because they have to pay for bills, they need food, they need, but if you have the privilege, then can that privilege be used to make sure that, somehow in some way, maybe it doesn't have to be all the way, but like, what are those things we're doing?
Or doing little things on the side, like to get started. And if our viewers, listeners want to contact you or get involved, how can they do that?
If you just go to our website, it's surgeforwater.org. And yeah, you can, there's emails there, and it's shilpa.alva@surgeforwater.org would be the other way to email me directly.
For 11 years, Surge for Water has been providing vulnerable communities around the world with access to some of life's most essential needs, such as water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions. Now more than ever, water and soap save lives, yet 3 billion people don't have a way to wash their hands at home. But we're out to make a difference. Right now, our teams are installing critical hand washing stations. These aren't only going in homes, but also in hospitals and markets, helping people stay safe where it matters most. Through our partners, we're producing and distributing soap and even teaching communities how to make their own. We're also making cloth masks and educating on COVID-19 prevention, including how to wash hands properly. But while Surge is on the ground taking action in our global communities, we also stand with each of you in our deeply connected world. As we care for the weakest among us, we know that we are stronger together. Access to fresh, clean water continues to be a life-changing source for hope and joy. Up next, favorite things. Opening up to happiness and joy.
Welcome to Favorite Things for our featured goddesses, as well as our guest goddess, Shilpa Alva. And these are things that bring us joy. It doesn't have to be a physical object. It can be something that you've heard or you like to wear, or a color, anything. So, Nina, how about you?
What gives me a lot of peace right now is I truly believe that our kids, they're already so far ahead of us in what their purpose is and what they fight for. I mean, which brings me to what I brought. My eldest daughter, I was the only one in the house up until maybe 3 months ago that we would buy cases of plastic water bottles. I was the only one allowed to drink them. I half empty bottles around my house made me crazy, so wasteful. But it's what I used. I didn't like any of the other recyclable, reusable water bottles. I didn't like the straw. I didn't like the size. I didn't like the taste. I hated them. And they all sort of obliged me for a while. And my eldest daughter said, Mom, this isn't good for the environment. You need to stop using these bottles. And I said, but it's the size and it's the top and everything. So she found me on Amazon. This is exactly the same size as those plastic water bottles, but it's reusable, washable. And my favorite
Really?
is you take it apart so you can have almost like a wider mouth to drink or fill up or put ice in to keep it cold. And everything's so all goes into the dishwasher and is used. And these are mine. No one's allowed to have these. These belong to me, and I circulate them through the dishwasher. But makes me feel purposeful, makes me feel like I'm doing good. And I'm so glad that my daughter had the wherewithal to say enough and push me forward. So
What is that called? What is that called?
COPCO, Copco. I got them on Amazon. I have a gray one. The bands, there's all different colors, but it breathes a little bit, but it's life changing for me.
Shilpa, have you seen those?
I have not seen those. I was just going to be like, here's my Surge water bottle. So I mean, we're a water organization, so I have to like, it's Clean Canteen actually, but yeah, we have ours. But yeah, it's funny, Dina, so like when we are in the field and stuff, like we insist that everyone brings their own water bottles. We don't have plastic water bottles at any event, anything like that. And sometimes, I mean, we have guests, so they'll break the rules. And I'm like, can't be in the picture with that. Like we can't even be seen holding a plastic water bottle because it's so like,
yeah,
you know,
I mean, my daughter was pretty mortified. She's like, I can't, you're so far behind. Like, it's enough. And I was like, she's right. So
well, you should be really proud of yourself for making that change, because that's all we need, right? Like it's a perfect example of being so comfortable with something and then changing to,
right.
I want one of those. I too hate seeing the half, you know, when you're out and stuff at picnics and you see the half. We have the Surge one that we use, as well as a few others reusable. Rachel, what did you bring to share?
I just have to show you, this isn't what I brought, but this is what I hold all the time. It's rose quartz, and it's for love, and I love the shape of it, and it's so smooth, and so I always keep it on my desk and I hold it, and I have my other stones that I hold if I'm looking for energy. But today, really what I meant to talk about is my RBG. And I even wore this necklace, like RBG. My mom made this necklace, and it's like a volcanic rock, and you can put essential oils in it, and it's just like healing and cooling. But Dina, like you referenced earlier, I feel like I have woken up, and as liberal and left-leaning and conscious as I think I am, I feel like I am part of the problem, and I am doing a ton of inner reflection, and I want to have the conversations as well. And we can't change our lens. Like, I am a white female woman of privilege, Jewish mother, but like there's all these, you know, we all have all these different labels and identities, but it is our lens. And I don't think we need to apologize for our lens, but we need to widen our lens and see the lens of others. And as much as we think that we are, this week, all the walls have come down for me, and I am really in a period of self-exploration. And my son gave me this because for Mother's Day, I made my boys, when the documentary was out, I made them go with me. I'd seen it once, and I was like, okay, this is what I want for Mother's Day, is for you boys to come with me. And so I am trying to channel her in this moment in life.
I love that. How about Alyssa?
I was just going to say, before I jump to my favorite thing, it has been very disheartening to see how COVID has really set us back in so many ways on using recyclable products and not using straws. I mean, in an effort for everyone to sort of keep their distance and you know, not touch too many things. The grocery stores now, Whole Foods doesn't let you bring in your bags anymore. So they keep putting my groceries in paper bags. And I think, I have all these bags sitting in my trunk and they won't let me bring them in. Or on planes, I know they serve cans of water with a straw so that you can put it under your mask and drink the water. You know, why everyone doesn't bring their own reusable water bottle on the straw. But I sort of digress a bit. It's just been unfortunate to see how this pandemic has really affected our inability to be as conscious about environmentally safe products. But what I brought today, I was thinking a lot about purpose and identity. And Rachel, you mentioned sort of how you see the world, through our own lens. And I see a lot of my identity and a lot of how I see the world. In most cases, it's how you were brought up, but in particular, my grandparents really had a tremendous amount of influence on my life and how I see the world and what I have and being grateful for what I have. So I'll just show you something I keep on a bulletin board close to where I sit every day is this photo it's a very old photo, and it's of my grandparents' wedding. I hope you can see that. Is that okay? The two people getting married are my grandparents, surrounded by brothers, sisters, their parents. I was named after my great-grandmother. This is actually the back of an invitation to a family reunion, but I used this photo. I didn't actually have the photo, but this is what I used. And my grandfather, well, all of those people in that photo, except for the little girl, were born in various parts of Europe, Poland, Russia, and came to this country as young children with nothing, absolutely nothing. My grandfather, my mom's dad, had maybe a grade school education, nothing further, but really, when you talk about that, the American dream, right? He was going to come to this country, like maybe $1 total to his name, and work his way up to a job and being able and finding a way to be educated and raise family. So my grandfather, worked his way up through the world of printing, various newspapers in New York until he one day, he was able to put himself through night school to get a high school diploma, and ultimately bought a company, and that was his livelihood. But in doing that, he was able to support his family, my mom and my aunt, and and he really was a patriarch in our family. So the values that I think that were so important to him really sort of got passed down to my generation. And I hope I'm passing along to my kids. But most importantly, he stood for getting the best education you can afford to get. And it might not be in such a linear path, but sort of when you can, in your own life, find ways to learn and to grow and to get an education, to work really, really hard, as he did for many years with very little, but working very hard to be able to support his family. He was about family. Family came first, no matter what, always sort of making that his priority. And giving back to the world when he ultimately could. He really became a very big supporter of a lot of Jewish causes, particularly in the New York area. He always donated anonymously. He always said he never wanted his name attached to anything, any money that he gave. That was how he did it, but he was very philanthropic to the causes that he believed in. And it's just a great sort of American story. And it's something, and I think about him and his journey, which was hard for a very, very long time. And it's really pushed me in my own life to try to do the best I can to kind of live up to the standards that I think he set for all of us. So I think about this. I have this picture. I look at it all the time, and it's kind of a real big part of my identity and who I am.
I agree that photographs are so important to have as a visual reminder of how we can live in this world, what our values are, and what we can do moving forward to inspire us. And along those lines, well, although it's not a photograph, as a preschool teacher, I really try and not just teach the kids how to share, how to cooperate, but to look inside themselves. And without them even realizing, by reading books like this, this is Dr. Wayne Dyer, Incredible You. This is one of my favorite ones. Just saying all the things that you're possible to do. I think I am. Again, the things that you can do to powerful affirmations. But one of my favorite ones is based on The Little Engine That Could, but it's a modern version. I knew you could. And I'm not going to read the whole story, but I did tab off some. So here I play preschool teacher to you, but I love it because we're talking about our passion and being on the right track. So first of all, you must find your own track so you can start right away and not be held back. But which track is yours? Well, that all depends on which way it's going and where it might end. Different tracks wind around, over, under, and through. So pick out the one that works best for you. So that's kind of like find your passion, try it, leap, just go forward. And then this is interesting because a lot of times when we as adults find something that we might want to try, and like Shilpa, you said, there was some reaction, some pushback, and maybe thinking, wait, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. So the train is thinking, but the plane might wish that he could get out of the air, saying, I wish I could travel like the train down there. The cars will watch as you speed right along, and they'll say to each other, look how fast and so strong. Don't worry about not being a car or a plane. Just enjoy the trip that you'll take as a train. I love it because just be happy who you are. And then try to remember that the world is so wide, full of all kinds of people with their own trains to ride. Just stay true to yourself as you travel your track with no second guessing and no looking back. And finally, which is hard to do because we always, I ruminate. Did I do the right thing? Oh, I don't know if I'm on the right track. So finally, there's more about life that you'll learn as you go because figuring things out on your own helps you grow. Just trust in yourself and you'll climb every hill. Say, I think I can. And you know what? You will. So you're laughing, but it's true. If we instill these things in our children and we continue their passions of things that, like when you were 7, Shilpa, or when I was younger too, like wanting to help kids, I think that it's really important to tap back into that track, to be on that track and not be diverted by planes and cars, and you'll be happy being that train on that track. So that's one of my favorite things are these books. Shilpa, what did you bring?
I brought this, let me show you guys. It's this neck, it's just these pendants. Okay, there's a bunch of them. I have even more. And these are, so when I first went to Haiti, I got really close to one of our field partners, him and his wife, and they both happened to be artists. And his wife would be sitting, and I started staying with them on my trips there. I would just stay in their home. And then there's amazing Haitian couples, super artistic. Their house would be just tons of artists from Haiti coming through. And it just gives you a different perspective of this culture, this rich art culture that exists there beyond the poverty we're used to see. And she makes jewelry. And what would happen is on every one of these all represent different trips. And I have even a few more. On every trip, she would ask me, she'd always have these box of stones, and she would ask me, okay, how are you feeling on this trip? What are you channeling? And I'd be like, well, I feel really uncomfortable. I feel this. And then she would go pick out the stone that would be responding to how I feel. So this one, I think it's tourmaline or whatever. And this is Boards of Evil. And it has smoky quartz. And that is something that I think again, similar to it grounds you. So it's everyone represents my feelings on that trip. So she would make these for me, hand make them. She's sitting under there's no electricity in it. She's sitting there, hand making these beautiful. And I'm not even into jewelry, but this is definitely the kind of jewelry that has meaning that I continue to hold on to because it's so precious, and they're all semi-precious stones.
It's beautiful.
And just so you know, I have it all written because I have a box of stones here. Smoky quartz is actually healing.
Okay, so that makes sense. She was warding off evil and then healing, right? That was probably what I was feeling on that trip. Yeah, so maybe you can tell me because I forgot it. I never wrote it down, for each of them. I know one of these stones is magic. She was trying to bring magic into my life. This is quartz. It was intuition and copper. She put quartz and copper together in one of them. Yeah,
they do all have meanings. I also like stones, and I like to hold them, and they have a power within them. So thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your favorite things on Grateful Goddesses today.
Unleashed your inner goddess yet? Thanks for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. We invite you to visit our website, www.gratefulgoddesses.com to access today's show notes as well as other helpful resources. Don't forget to leave a review. Until next time, stay strong and empowered to be a grateful goddess.